Welcome to Gifted Academics Rapid Review. I'm Dr. Katie, and we're going to talk about the difference between the muscle spindle and the GTO, or the Golgi Tendon Organ. These can be confused easily, so we want to make sure that you feel really comfortable knowing what each of them do and knowing the differences between the two and exactly what the CSCS wants you to know. So muscle spindles and the GTO are both things that help our muscles and our brain and our tendons understand their position in space. And that's proprioception, the ability for our brain to have the awareness of where we are in space when we're at rest, when we're doing activity, when muscles and tendons are being stressed, for example. The muscle spindle is excitatory for muscle contraction, meaning when it's activated, it's going to have an excitatory effect and cause muscle contraction. So remember that. And these muscle spindles are proprioceptors, or sensory organs inside muscle fibers. And you can see on the screen here, it's a simple reflex arc. The muscle fiber, the intrafusal fibers inside the muscle, are going to detect a length and rate of change in the length of the muscle. It's going to send that information through a sensory neuron, where it goes to the spinal cord to synapse with a motor neuron. That motor neuron is going to go right back to the same muscle, but the extrafusal fibers now, and tell it to contract. So it's a simple arc of sensory information coming from the muscle, going to the spinal cord, where its job is to synapse or talk to a motor neuron, and that motor neuron going back to the muscle to tell it to contract. It's activated by a stretch or a lengthening of the muscle. And the bigger the stretch is, the bigger the activation of the muscle spindle, and therefore the bigger contraction as a result. So the pathway, to keep it really simple, step one, the muscle is going to lengthen, and therefore the spindle inside the intrafusal muscle fibers is also going to lengthen. That's going to activate that sensory neuron of the intrafusal muscle fiber or the muscle spindle itself. That sensory neuron is going to send a signal all the way to the spinal cord, where it synapses or meets with a motor neuron. That motor neuron is going to go right back to the muscle and to tell it to contract. Then if we talk about the GTO, or the Golgi Tendon Organ, this is an inhibitory muscle response. So the muscle spindle is excitatory and tells the muscle to contract. The GTO is inhibitory and tells the muscle to not contract and instead relax. So while they're both providing sensory information, they're telling the muscle to do two different things. Muscle spindle is excited and wants the muscle to contract. GTO is inhibitory and wants the muscle to relax. The GTO is located in the tendons near the myotendinous junction, or where the muscle and tendon kind of come together. And just like the muscle spindle, the GTO is a proprioceptor, or a sensory organ too. The GTO attaches to the extrafusal muscle fibers, and it's activated by a tendon stretch, and it relates information back to the spinal cord as well to tell the muscle to relax. So the pathway for the GTO is similar, but the effect is different. So we have this GTO in the myotendinous junction, where tendon and muscle kind of start to coalesce and become one. And it's going to dictate, or it's going to sense some sort of lengthening or a stretch of the tendon. When that stretch happens, the sensory neuron from the GTO is going to travel to the spinal cord, where it actually synapses instead with the motor neuron right away, and something in between called an inhibitory interneuron. Then that inhibitory interneuron is what synapses with the motor neuron, and it's telling the muscle to relax as the motor neuron sends that inhibitory signal back to the original muscle. So instead of it telling the muscle to contract, like in the muscle spindle, we're getting inhibition or relaxation of the muscle instead. So an example would be if you're holding a really heavy dumbbell, The GTO of your biceps is detecting too great of a tension on the tendon, and the muscle becomes inhibited to protect the tendon, and you drop the dumbbell. So both of these are protective mechanisms, but the GTO's job is to inhibit or calm the muscle down and not let it contract. So the big difference is they're both proprioceptor or sensory organs in the muscle. The muscle spindle is excitatory, and it's going to tell the muscle to contract when it's been activated. The GTO is inhibitory, and it's going to tell the muscle to relax or not activate once the GTO has been stimulated. The muscle spindle has a really simple, almost reflex arc of tendon or muscle stretch being sensed, sensory neuron from the muscle spindle going to the spinal cord, synapsing there with the motor neuron that comes right back to the same muscle and is excitatory and tells it to contract. GTO, however, tendon stretch is noticed by the GTO. Sensory neuron from the GTO goes to the spinal cord, but has a pit stop at an inhibitory interneuron first. Then the motor neuron is told to inhibit or relax that muscle, and it goes right back to the same muscle and inhibits it or tells it to not contract. Similar steps, but it's important to remember the differences between the two.